tell me who you are and how you reached here.
Hey, bro.
Tell me, how's the Delhi running scene?
It's pretty awesome. I mean, it's insane how it's growing.
Running like Usain Bolt, swimming if I can't float with the tape.
Nothing is guaranteed in life. It's just about probability, and what you do only changes that probability.
I wanted to put you in a spot.
I took a student loan. I was lucky enough to get some part of a scholarship, work part-time jobs through the MBA.
And Babson, it was.
There are enough kids in the world that need a home. So if I ever have the urge to nurture a kid, then we can always adopt.
So this is going to be special. Today I'm sitting with my oldest and one of my closest friends. We have seen each other's ups and downs, highs and lows, and today we're going to discuss his entire journey and how he is who he is today. I'll introduce you to Dhruv Varma. Dhruv Varma, tell me who you are and how you reached here.
Hey, bro. Always good to see you.
Same here, bro.
Like you pointed out, we've kind of known each other for a while. But about me, for those that don't know me, I'm a runner by passion. I am a product manager by profession. And at my core, I'm a nerd and a foodie. So that's kind of me in a few words. I think the question that you asked is fairly broad, and we could probably spend the extent
I wanted
of
to put you in a spot.
So, how I got here, I was born and raised in Delhi, as you know. So, schooling here in Delhi, born and raised pretty much in this house. Lived here all my life. I did my engineering after school, which is also in Delhi. So, I'm a mechanical engineer by qualification. And then I started a venture after my engineering. That was my little stint with entrepreneurship. And then after that venture failed, I decided to go get an MBA to learn more about about business in general, because I realized that I was a out and out techie, and the reason that my venture failed wasn't a lack of technical knowledge. It was a lack of business knowledge. So with that, I decided to get an MBA. I initially was looking at a few schools here. Then I started to expand my search a little, because the Indian education system is very academic. You know, so even when I got into engineering, I was a little disappointed, because I've always been a tinkerer. You know, I've worked with things with my own hands, and the first remote control car that I built that I had was one that I built in a shoebox or things like that. So, you know, it was always very hands-on. So my dad is an electronics engineer, and you know, he had that knack, and I probably picked it up from him. I don't know whether it was genetic or whether just being around him, nature versus nurture, or but I always worked with tools and tried to build things with my own hands. Versus when I got into engineering, you know, I was one of the few people in mechanical engineering who chose mechanical as a stream. Because the era that we grew up in, people chose computer science, electronics and electrical, EC, and those kind of fields. Like mechanical and civil were kind of the old school sort of engineering fields. But I was very interested in cars, like most boys are, you know, like, you know, when we were in.
I want to just ask here for everyone to know,
Yeah.
what era are you talking about? What year are you talking about? So people know what we're talking about here.
So we graduated from school in 2004. So engineering was basically 2004 to 2008.
Yeah.
And so I was a car buff. I still am, not as ardent as I used to be, or as we used to be back in the day. Whether that would be a good point of discussion as well. Your car modifying days and our need for speed fueled.
Total club.
That's probably not a good topic to venture into. But anyway, so my love for cars took me to mechanical engineering. Somewhere down the line, it also merged with my passion for the environment and kind of sustainability. And so I started working on this project on improving the efficiency of cars and It was I don't want to get into the technical details of it, but that's basically what my venture was. We were trying to generate hydrogen on board the car to substitute as a fuel. So basically making an existing car a hybrid. So burning two different sources of fuel.
Is it the different project when you made a go-kart and this, or it was the similar related projects?
It was different, similar lines. So the go-kart was actually my final year project for the engineering. So in every engineering course, the final year you have to build a project.
Right.
So you have to actually build something. So I had made a hybrid go-kart, which was a hybrid like we know hybrids to be, petro-electric hybrids. So part of it was an internal combustion engine and part of it was an electric hybrid. So you're basically charging the battery and through regenerative braking, or when the engine is idling or whatever, and then you're using that energy through an electric motor when you kind of need extra power.
Do you still have that go-kart?
Yeah, it's still in the garage.
Do you ever drive it?
So yeah, the go-kart is still here. It's in the garage, but I haven't started it. I haven't driven it in a while. So it probably needs a little love and care to get it going again, a little bit of service, but it's still operating.
But when you started this go-kart project, was it still like a trend back then that people are trying to make hybrids, or it was a very new concept?
Yeah, no, the hybrids were around, not so much in India.
Right.
But the Prius was making waves across the globe. There were some other EVs and hybrids that were starting to get popular. It was a concept at the time. It wasn't very feasible. And my whole idea with that project was to show that a drivetrain can be built more cost effectively, a more simpler way, because the biggest challenge at the time, apart from batteries of course, was the cost of the drivetrain. It's like when you have two different sources of power, it's like how do they come together to deliver that power to the wheels? So with my go-kart concept was a simplistic sort of another way of doing it. So that was a college project, but the research project that I was kind of working on at the time was kind of this idea of, see, in a normal car, you can't attach an additional motor, that like a hybrid would have. You can't attach that whole battery system. You might be able to do a smaller version of it, and there are some aftermarket kits that have come out that do it from the gearbox. In fact, there was a junior from my college who did a project around that as well, who was working on commercializing that as well. But it's very challenging to take an existing car and turn it into a petro-electric hybrid. Almost to the point of making it economical would be very challenging. So the idea that I was working on was, instead of storing excess energy in the form of electrical power in a battery, you were basically storing it or either in a battery or generating some amount of hydrogen from water, just splitting it into hydrogen and oxygen, and using that hydrogen as a supplemental fuel for when you needed more power. It worked great in theory.
Yeah.
But in practicality, I think the gains weren't as high as I would have liked them to be. So given the overall cost of the system and the materials that you needed to get any efficiency or get any useful gains in fuel efficiency out of it, the cost was so high that the ROI didn't sort of exist. So yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to make it work. But I think one day I reached that point that I always feel like I'm so close. But I think at some point I realized that it's probably not going to work. Or, and I'm probably, like they say that when you invent a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was stuck in, maybe I was stuck in that just because I had come up with this idea that I was in love with, that I was trying to force an outcome of making it work. But, it's, once you come to that realization, it's a hard decision to make. When you're an entrepreneur and you've been doing something for a few years, it's very hard to call it, that, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this anymore.
You get attached to it so much that it's hard to part ways.
And then it's also hard to deal with the consequences of it.
Yeah.
In a way, more about the social aspect of it. Because it becomes a part of your identity, right? It's who you are. Unfortunately, society seems to recognize all of us by our careers and what we do for a living. So, and especially at that age, you're like in your early 20s, you're out there to prove something to the world, you're out there to change the world. It's like you're naive and you're like hopeful and you're like, you don't know anything, I know it all, and I'm going to show the world like why you're wrong, kind of thing. So it was very hard at that age to call it, accept defeat, and then move on. But the moment I took that decision, it was so liberating. And it's always in retrospect that you realize that you should have taken this decision so, like, way long ago. It's like after it's done, it's like, why the hell was I like still stuck in here? Because the moment you let go of it, it opens up this whole avenue of like the whole world.
It opens 10 more opportunities.
Exactly.
Right?
So, and even after that, like I was such a techie that I went, my first instinct was to go get an MTech. And I applied to one college, got it. And within 1 week, I was like, dude, like this is not why your business failed. And if that's what you want to do, if you want to get into hardcore technical this thing, then, then that's fine. Then, go further down the technical route. But if you really want to make a change in the world and like, you have these grand sort of things, then there's enough technology out there. If you have the ability to commercialize it, to make a real business out of it, to make a real business case out of it, if you can bridge that gap, I think you can have a much larger impact. So that's the kind of conversation that I had with myself that led me to decide to go get an MBA. And then, like I was saying that, in India, when I started looking at the business schools, it was very academic. All of them were very academic, much like the engineering, So I was very hands-on in the engineering, and it was all so academic in the engineering course that it kind of put me off a little. So I wanted to go and get an MBA where I actually learn something that I can apply to a business, a startup. So I first started looking at some of the newer schools in India, like the ISBs and a few others like it. So I started to prepare for the GMAT. Once I started to prepare for the GMAT, it kind of opened up my mind a little. I was like, okay, maybe there are other schools in Asia. And I was like, why am I limiting myself? If the best education that I'm going to get is in the West, in terms of the pure education quality, then why am I limiting myself? I should play the biggest game that I can. And I realized like, part of the limitation was coming from, thinking the thought of how much it's going to cost. An education in UK or the US is crazy expensive. I remember applying and my dad literally coming to me one day and being like, how are you planning to fund this? I hope you're not expecting me to cut you a check for this because that's not happening. So I said, yeah, no, I'm not expecting that. But I'm just playing the game, we'll see where it goes. And things worked out. Like, it was, I took a student loan. I was lucky enough to get some part of a scholarship and, kind of made that worked part-time jobs through the MBA and stuff like that.
And Babson, it was, one of the best MBAs.
Yeah, it's ranked number 1 for entrepreneurship. I think it's been 30 years in a row now. Wow. And so because I had a focus on getting an education that's very practical and applicable, it was pretty much a no-brainer. Also the fact that they valued my entrepreneurial experience, which others were looking at, other schools were looking at. So, there are people who worked at large multinationals. It's very tangible what they did, right? I had a failed startup on my resume, right? So they're like, most people are like, what did you do for these 2 years? Like, what were you doing? Like, not 2, it was 4 years at that point. 3 years when I was applying. So most people are like, what were you doing? Like, it's like very hard for them to comprehend or value what was being done. Going to a school that was focused on entrepreneurship, they valued that experience. They valued that I did something. There's the whole attitude of a bias for action. That you get out and do something. And then you learn something out of it, you pivot and kind of like the entrepreneurial way. It's never linear. You start, you do something, you learn something from it, you pivot, and then you kind of go again. So they valued that bias for action. And I was lucky enough to get a scholarship for it, which made it a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, you got like 60% scholarship. How much was it?
Almost, yeah.
That's
little
amazing.
Bit more than that, more than 60% of my tuition was covered, which was which was huge.
That's huge. Yeah.
Because I mean, for me, it was still expensive, right? I mean, living in the US, the travel, the stay, and everything, the housing and everything. At that time, I still had to take a student loan. I still worked part-time jobs and everything. But it was, I think that gave me a huge sense of accomplishment as well. At that time, like I think that it was the first time when I think I stood on my own feet, like, how they say that you kind of come into your own being.
Yeah.
Like I kind of went out of the shelter. I'd always lived in India. I'd always lived in Delhi. And you know how Delhi culture is. Everybody judges you based on what you're wearing, what you're driving, where you live, what your last name is, where your family is from, so on and so forth. But when I landed in Boston, I was me.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who I was. Nobody cared who I was. Nobody cared what background I came from. They cared about who I was as an individual, what I was out to do, and what I brought to the table. So it was really fulfilling from that perspective, that I was able to let go of all the, it's of all the strings, like all the,
Which is anchoring you down.
it's anchoring you down or even boasting you up. I mean, I can't deny that I come from privilege, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we've had access to a lot more than most people do, than the masses do, right? It's like, so from that perspective, I feel like if I hadn't done that, today I may be questioning, whatever I did, was that, how much of a function was it, help from, my family, my parents, or a function of like me being so-and-so's son, so-and-so's brother, so-and-so's cousin, like, so-and-so's friend, versus this was like I was nobody, right? I'm nobody, I'm here, and like this is what I have to offer, and then you kind of build from that, which was really
Then
satisfying.
you reached there. I was talking to Abhishek, our common friend, right? So Abhishek is talking to me and it's like, Arpit, what do you think? Isn't it luck that, 5 people go for a job and 1 gets it and 4 don't get it? Isn't it luck? It's obviously luck, right? That why did that guy get it? I'm like, you know what? You're not looking into the details of that person. You're just judging him for the academics that all 5 have. But you're not judging him for the experience and the added value he's getting. For you, it's all generic that, okay, IITians, IIMs, but you're not seeing what he's done. So he's like, so luck doesn't work. I'm like, you make your own luck. It's like preparedness meeting opportunity.
Right.
And of course, there's a luck factor, but it's not as big as you make it. In your case, let's say you failed on your project,
right,
and you did your go-kart project, you did these projects. It somehow helped you to get into Babson.
Right. Yeah.
And then think about this, that if Abhishek was looking at 5 people and he says Dhruv did it, and he would like, oh, Dhruv was lucky. But the real factor is, because Dhruv put on his resume his entrepreneur journey and the project did in the past, which got selected.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's always in the detail which you don't see from, if you zoom out and see 5 people together, they all look the same, they all have the same nose and same ears, and then you blame everything on luck.
Yeah.
But I actually feel that it's not luck.
Right.
Of course, there is some percentage to it, but you make your own journey. If you wouldn't have done that project, I'm sure you would be doing some MTech somewhere or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
nothing wrong with that either.
Nothing wrong with that, of course.
It comes down to what you choose, and I think so. My perspective on what you touched upon on luck. So that I'm an atheist, right? It's like I don't believe in things being written, or there being a superior intelligent being guiding everything that's happening, or everything happens for a reason, or whatever. Some people call it luck, some people call it fate, some people call it destiny. I call it chance, right? And there is probability in anything happening. When you work hard or you are intentional about doing something, all you're altering is the probability. So hard work increases the probability. You see people who are born with such wealth and opulence that they don't need to do anything. A Mukesh Ambani's son doesn't need to do much for him to have a really high probability to be the chairman of, Reliance Industries.
Yeah.
Right? Versus a kid born in a small village in some corner of India has to work really hard to get to even a fraction of the success and the wealth
Of
that an
course,
Ambani
of
would
course,
have,
of course.
right? So it comes down to probability, right? So what you do improves your odds. Nothing is guaranteed. Even being born as Ambani's son doesn't guarantee that you will be
The CEO of the company.
the CEO of the company or wealthy forever,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there are enough examples of people who have failed, like not even going very far. Like, I mean, Anil Ambani himself has seen that part of that journey, right? I mean, both the brothers were at the top. One chose a certain path and one chose another path, and one's doing a lot better than the other, and that's just the way it goes. And I think even amongst people that we know, we've seen people within our short
Yeah.
span of short careers or whatever, we've seen people skyrocket,
Yeah.
and we've seen people go from the top to the bottom. So nothing is given, nothing is guaranteed in life. It's just about probability, and what you do only changes that probability, only changes the stakes. It only changes the chances, not the stakes, but the chances of you getting to where you want or not, or getting to somewhere that you haven't even imagined sometimes.
Okay, so Babson happened, and then you started living the great American dream.
Yeah.
You had a job, you had a beautiful Mustang. Can you show the Mustang? Okay, that's the Mustang. Okay, so you
You
had the
danced in front
Mustang,
of
you had
it.
the, yeah. So yeah, I do that. I make dance videos in front of cars.
I'm giving away other secrets.
So yeah, that happened, and then you were living there for such a long time. How did this happen that you had a perfect job, you had a house to yourself, you were living in a beautiful town, Austin,
Yeah.
and then you were always, your one eye was always in Delhi or in India that you want to go back. What was going in your mind that you want to go back?
So when I went there, I went with the perspective of coming back. I went there, like I said, I went there because I felt I was going to get the best kind of education based on what I was looking for. I felt I would get that education there. So I went there for the education. I wanted to stay on to actually get a little global experience. My goal was to work for a year or two to get that global experience, to understand how that work culture works, how that system works, and also to make some money to pay back some of that student loan. So the idea was to go get that exposure, apply everything that I learned in the MBA, kind of like enforce all of that and reinforce all of that, and then come back with that knowledge and education and wisdom sort of thing. But I ended up staying for much longer than I had intended. So
That turned out to be how many years?
so I was in the US for 7.5 years. So 2 years for the MBA and then about 5.5 years of working for the company that I still work for, Green Revolution Cooling. And so the choice to go work for a startup was also an interesting one, right? I mean, most people after an MBA choose to go either work for big companies, or coming out of Babson, they tend to start their own companies or start their own ventures. A lot of people come from family business backgrounds and go back to their businesses or start something within that. So the choice of going to work for getting employed by a startup was also interesting, but that kind of also happened. So this is where you might call it luck, chance, whatever. So during the MBA, I got a fellowship through the Environmental Defense Fund, which gave me an internship at Yahoo during the summer between the 2 years. And they placed me in their energy and sustainability department for their data centers, trying to look for energy efficiency opportunities and building the business case for it, which is exactly what I went to get my MBA for doing, right? To learn to build the business case for technology and tying in the whole sustainability angle. So it was perfect. Only thing was I didn't know what a freaking data center was, right? It's like servers, like how many servers are you talking about? It was only when I walked into a data center while working at Yahoo, and I saw like a football field worth of like racks and racks of data centers, and I was just like, jaw dropped, like, okay, this is where the internet lives. Like, like you don't realize the scale of these things. Like for us, the cloud is this, thing in the sky, like somewhere, like intangible sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then I suddenly saw the tangible side of it, of that back-end infrastructure. But anyway, so the point was that I kind of fell into this role, and then which took me to Austin. It's a beautiful city, by the way. I love that city. Heading back there in a few days, which I'm pretty excited about. But I built this whole life, lived the American dream, right? I mean, I've always been a firm believer of like, when in Rome,
Do the Romans.
that's probably the Arpit Sharma way of doing it. But yeah, no, I really wanted to get the most of my experience there. So everything that I dreamed of, everything that we thought of, like, that we wanted to do. So I had this good job. Then for me, like, the first thing was I wanted to buy a car. Like, when I was in the US, I wanted to buy like American muscle, right? Yeah. So the first car that I bought was a 2013 Mustang. And that was pretty fun. And I had a lot of fun, like, playing around with it, nerding out with it, getting my hands dirty, and like, being very hands-on. With that, like, I did a lot of projects, like changed the whole exhaust by myself, like with another friend, like right from the headers to the tailpipes, and cut out like vents in the hood, and bought a tuner, changed the tuning maps, did all of that, like all the fun stuff, like all the dreams that 14-year-old me or 14-year-old us would have had. Like, I was like, okay, this is awesome. But then at some point I was like, you know what? I don't even need something this practical. I can go even less practical. Because I moved into a place, so I bought a house, which was another part of the dream. Was, at that age, it's one of those big goals that you want in life, is to, buy a house. Here I live in a home that I probably couldn't afford, and probably it would take me 5 careers of mine to like maybe get something close to. So the family had a house. So I knew that I would never fulfill that dream in India. So I was like, while I'm there, it's a lot more affordable, especially in terms of the salaries versus the affordability of homes. So I bought a house. It also made financial sense in terms of an investment, and it was pretty close to work. So most days I would bike into work. Some days I would drive in, but it was every time I was going out in the evening, I don't drink and drive. That's a big no-no for me. So I'd be taking an Uber or a Lyft anyway. So I was like, okay, I only drive this 3 miles and I ride my bike most of the time. I don't need a practical car. So that's when the idea of like buying a 65 Mustang came in. So I sold the 2013. I bought a 65 Mustang, which is just too much.
That was a bizarre car, man. That was amazing.
Her name was Daenerys. It was really hard to let go of when I was moving back. But that's why I got a tattoo of it before moving back.
Can you show the tattoo once? You getting the tattoo there?
So...
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I had a great life there. I was living the American dream because I had great friends. I still do. You've met so many of them. Every time I go back, I stay with my friends. I've lived with them in parts in different times. They're just great people. So on paper, I had everything there. I had a great job that I was passionate about. I had a home, a really nice house. Like, it's an old house, but a great backyard. Threw lots of parties there. I had a great time.
I was there at your house.
Yeah. You've come and stayed there. I had a great car, and I had these hobbies like working on the car over the weekends. It's an old car. You always need to do something, some upgrade, some restoration work, something or the other. I used to do that over the weekends. I used to brew beer, as you remember, and so it was all great on paper, but I always had this thing of wanting to come back.
What was it that was what
it was,
made you come back?
It was purely emotional, to be honest. It was. I knew that living there, I could do a lot more, but it was a lot more of the same. I knew that I could get maybe a bigger, better house. I could get a better car, I don't know if I can get better, but like I could get more cars.
Yeah.
I could get different cars. But it was more of the same, right? I could maybe go to different places over the weekend, different kind of meals. Not like that was ever a limitation there or anything, but it just felt like it was more of the same. And at some point that stopped being inspiring. Plus, there was always this void, of just missing home. And it was the friends, you guys, family, the little things, the challenge with living abroad is that most people become very unhappy living abroad because they're trying to recreate their home there. So like Indians are trying to recreate India in the US. I feel like if you're trying to do that, you're setting yourself up for like disappointment, right? I mean, because, and that's the point of like when in Rome, like do as the Romans, because when you're there, embrace it, right? I mean, I wasn't trying to like cook Indian food every day.
Yeah, you can't replicate it. You
can't,
have the,
like,
even if it's food, you can't have the same spices.
Right.
You can't have the same lentils. You can't have the same
You have
chapati,
to,
roti.
you have,
can't have.
you have to immerse yourself in that culture, right?
Yeah.
Even when we travel, I know you're the same way. When you go abroad, when you travel, you want to immerse yourself in that culture because you want to experience it. That's why you're there. That's where the growth lies, right? And it's not even about the growth. It's like when you're there, at least experience that, right? So for me, like I experienced that to the fullest. And I traveled a lot within the US and abroad as well. But it was, at some point it felt like I was satisfied with everything that I got. But there was a void that I had, and I felt like, there was no context. Like even with the friends there, they didn't have the context of the first 25 years of my life. I used to kid that I can't make an andaz apna joke and expect them to get it. In the same way they would have some like Monty Python reference and like, I would be like, what? Like, I mean, I caught up with a lot of that culture and like, people were like, wait, you haven't done this? Like, it's like meeting some of our friends and being like, what, you haven't seen Andaz Apna? Or like, it's like, you have to like indoctrinate them at that point and be like, sit down and like watch this. So I did a lot of that, a lot of catching up, but like there was that missing context, right? And there were Indian friends that I made there as well, who again were great, but then it's only in parts and pieces, you miss the little things.
Tell me about your Indian friends there.
Yeah.
They were also like you, or they were like, no, this is home and we are depressed, but we are okay with it.
Not all of them were depressed. Some were. Some still are. You know who you are.
I told you to come back, but you didn't listen.
Some are stuck with the golden handcuffs, but because they don't want to give up the. So everybody has non-negotiables. There's everybody weighs the pros and cons of like living here versus living there. But the point is, first you got to make sure that there are no non-negotiables in any of the options. If there is a non-negotiable in the con side, that option is out. It doesn't matter how many pros it has on the other side, right? I mean, it's like the example that I give in a lot of political conversations as well is that how much money does a person need to make for you to accept domestic violence? It's like if there is domestic violence and abuse in a relationship, no matter how much prosperity and how many positives you have on the other side, that one non-negotiable is good enough for you to be like,
True.
Screw this, I'm walking away, right? So when you compare the two, if you have a non-negotiable in the cons, that's out. So for a lot of the Indian friends living in the US, there are non-negotiables in India in their cons list, which is why they're kind of like stuck there now.
Right.
Because living there, they've reached the point where they value certain things a lot more. So there's a very huge cultural difference. So there's one really stark difference that I want to talk about, is that there's a underlying culture of equality in that society. That is an inherent kind of feature of their culture, is that everyone is equal. At least the middle 80% of the population lives the same life, and they they would feel awkward and embarrassed if you gave anyone preferential treatment. Like if you were getting preferential treatment as an American, you would sort of feel embarrassed to be like, no, I'm okay standing here in line with just like everyone else. Like that's a very common phrase that you'll hear there is like just like everyone else. Like that's just so inherent there. Versus here, there's a hierarchy, and everyone aspires to be on the top of that hierarchy. People brag about the things that, oh, that was a 2-hour line, but I knew this guy and he took me from the side and I like crossed everything. I walked right in like while these guys are still freaking waiting and melting in the heat outside. Like, it's like a very different cultural thing. So for a lot of people, they get so used to that sense of equality that it's very hard for them to come back and fit back into this system. I guess for me, I went at a much later age, right? I went somewhere around 25. So I had worked here, I'd lived here, I kind of had grown up here. So I knew what I was coming back to.
Your roots were
yeah,
already
and I knew what I was
strong
coming
there,
back to. So it wasn't like a very...
there is this saying, Naval Ravikant, I really listened to him, I really like that guy. He said that, it's people have this human tendency that supposedly you're climbing a mountain. You reach half the mountain, you worked really hard. Now you can see the peak, but you don't see a way to reach the peak. So now to reach the peak, you have to come all the way down, take another path, and then you will reach the peak. But 90% of the population is not willing to do that. They're not willing to come down from there, lose their comfort, and climb again to reach the peak, and that's where it makes the difference.
Right.
And that's where people don't want to start again.
Yeah.
And that's where the most successful people do it right. He gave example Elon Musk, that he has no need to start another company and another company, but he goes back again and then rebuilds again for another company.
Right.
A lot of artists do that.
Yeah.
They completely come with a different genre, completely different style of music, another album. That's a separate issue that their existing fan base likes it or not. But that's how they keep reinventing themselves and stay significant and relevant with themselves also. They don't feel, because if you're at the same place, it gets so monotonous that you just lose the fun and the colors of life. You just think that ठीक है यार, whatever the life is, ठीक है यार, बस चला रहे हैं भाई, चला. Because you ask somebody successful, he will have everything, but he's like, oh dude, so what's happening? Like, कुछ नहीं भाई, मतलब चल रही है यार, life चल रही है और क्या करें? So people are not willing to do that, and that's what I see that you had to do. Come back,
rebuild,
figure things out, sell your beautiful car, sell that house, and rebuild again. And probably that is another way to reach to the peak. Maybe not the same peak, maybe some other peak.
Right. And that's the point, right? I mean, things are very dynamic, right? Even in entrepreneurship, in life, nothing is linear. It's like you think that you're here, you're going to do this, and you're going to get here. But it's never linear. It's always like the next place you reach, you get a different perspective. And then you're like, bro, this is not even the peak. Like, what you were saying is not even the peak is behind it. Like, I'm not even on the right mountain. Like, it's like, sometimes
it used to happen to me all the time earlier. When I used to go to meeting, I knew there was a big meeting coming up next day, and I'll prepare like crazy that, okay, if he asks me this, I will answer this. If he asks me this, I will have an answer ready this. If he asks me this, I'll prepare for this. And when I go to the meeting, it'll be a completely different discussion.
It's like it's gone as a life of its own.
Yeah, right? I mean, it was not even close to what I thought. So things turn out to be something else, and then I stopped preparing for things. In that case, that okay, the idea remains the same. I prepare the idea in depth, but I don't plan what he's going to say and what's going to happen and what is my reaction going to be for that. Because it's you don't know where the life is going. It's completely random. What cards are dealt to you, you don't know that.
And it's so I think there's one of my favorite quotes is play the game, don't make it significant. And I think that's kind of what level a lot of these successful people have reached. They're playing the game. Elon Musk doesn't need to do anything. Nobody needs to do anything. But then what do you do? What do you do with your life? Like, people think that I think it was a Jim Carrey quote that I wish that everybody gets all the fame and the money and success in the world, to know that that is not the answer. So it's like when you reach that point, we spend all our lives like chasing goals which are moving. Because it's like when we were super young in school, you thought 10 lakhs was like a shit ton of money. You know, and like today you'd be like, that's like, I can't live the rest of my life. I can't even freaking live a year on it.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, inflation and everything has also happened, but the context changes, the needs change, you know, everything changes. It's a moving goal. So there's no real goal for you to have. You have to realize that you're ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's all insignificant, right? So you have to come from that level of peace, of it being insignificant. That, you know, if something happens, like within a game, like if you're playing a game, it's not the end of the world if you lose a point, right? But you still play the game all out. Because when you're playing it, you want to win it. Exactly. You're playing to win it. So when you're playing it all out, but when you zoom out, you know that it's just a game. Don't add too much significance to it. We're a tiny fraction, particle in this whole giant universe. Whether we achieve our goals or not doesn't frigging change anything in the world. So I love that quote, and I think that kind of like, I feel like that's kind of the level at which a lot of these really successful people operate at, is that they play it as a game and they don't add any significance to it. They're willing to go all in all over again because they don't have that significance to it of that, and they have that faith in their own abilities because of the perspective that they've gained, the experience that they've gained of like how to build up. They've done it once, they're willing to do it again. You know, I see this in my running journey as well. Like, you know, the moment you do hit one distance, the very next week that distance becomes so much easier. So in every marathon training block, I have a 30-kilometer run, which is painful. The next week is a 32-kilometer run, which is always easier than the 30-kilometer run the week before. Because just in 1 week, my body's learned to like deal with it. So there's a little bit of adaptation and there's a little bit of mental being prepared for it as well. Like I know what's coming and like kind of I don't know what it is. There's multiple things functioning, working towards it. But every time you do it, it doesn't feel as hard. So I think they also reach that level of being like, oh, I know how to play this game, man. It's a game and I can play it again. We get caught up with the significance of it. We get too caught up with the attaching our own significance to like that monthly salary, to that, you know, comfort and having that comfort zone. And at some level, everybody gets a little complacent as well. Nothing wrong with that either. It just comes down to what your goals are and what inspires you, what keeps you going.
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, it's if you love what you do, you'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll be like, okay, I've done it, so
absolutely,
let's just
100%.
sit on the couch and Netflix all day.
Yeah.
You'll only do it if you want to do it.
Yeah.
If you learn some, like now you got into running. For a person who doesn't run, for him, you are a guy who's doing this for what reason? Where do you want to? Where are you going with this?
Yeah, he's running around in circles.
Yeah. Where do you plan to go running so much?
Yeah.
What is the end of it? You have achieved
like,
everything.
Why are you doing
Why are you doing this? Why do you struggling so much with this runs every day?
in this heat?
Yeah.
It's
so,
like,
so now, okay, you got back and you got into your remote work and everything. I want to quickly get into running because that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Tell me, you run for the runner's high, or you run for just proving something to yourself, or you run because you just want to run?
All of the above. So for me, like I feel extremely lucky to have found this passion.
Yeah.
I never thought that I was someone who would be a runner, and I think you would agree with me, having seen me grow up. We were like through school and college, like partying like crazy. So we still do a little bit, but like the point is that we were never that athletically inclined towards anything. I played basketball, did swimming and all of that, but like never to
a pro point.
I am not a pro at running anyway, but like I'm saying, but it's like the level of commitment and how big a part it plays in my life is like, even when you asked me to introduce myself, I started with I'm a runner by passion, even before my profession or my qualifications or anything, because that's kind of become a big part of my identity. That's who I see myself as. That's who I am. It's like I when I'm running, I I feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose. Like, it seems really ridiculous to be running around in circles to feel like you're fulfilling a purpose, but it's like, it just feels right. So there's this book called Born to Run, which kind of argues that humans evolved to run, that our bodies evolved to run, and like,
Yeah,
so,
that's a very interesting point, that only humans are the only living beings who are born to run, because no other animal has sweat glands.
yeah, so it's like, yeah, so exactly. So we are able to, so for when it comes to distance and endurance, there are races in the US where people are on horseback and there are people running, and the runners outrun the horses after, like, I can't remember what the distance was, some crazy
Wow.
distance, like 80 or 100 plus kilometers or 100 miles. People are running crazy distances, right? I mean, it's like humans have that ability. Our bodies have that ability. We just never explore it. For me, I find myself really lucky to have pushed myself to get to that point. It's like, and once I've done it, I feel like it is so unfortunate that most people don't push through to get this superpower. I literally think it's a superpower. I have the ability to change my mood. At 5K, it's like I come back a different person. I don't go for a run for 2 days and I'm grumpy AF. Like,
Same, and for great ideas.
yeah.
Whenever I'm stuck in my head and when I'm not able to find a way out, I just go for a walk or a run, and I have great ideas. It makes you so creative. I don't know what it is, and I actually read about it. I was curious that it's just me,
Yeah.
or it's just for everyone, and it's
Yeah.
a scientific fact
Yeah.
that your brain releases such chemicals that it gets more creative for that point of time.
So there's actually, so everyone keeps misreferencing endorphins here. So, I'm a nerd, so like this is my nerdy side in running coming out. So the runner's high doesn't actually happen because of endorphins. Endorphins play a big role in reducing your perception of pain, which allows you to kind of run. So, it's like after a while, like, because running marathon or ultra marathon or even half marathon or any distance, if you're depending on what your level of training is, like, it does get painful, right? So endorphins help you, is kind of your own body's own painkiller. The theory is that the runner's high actually comes from endocannabinoid glands in our brain. So endocannabinoid, as you might infer from the name, is similar to cannabis. So endo is just internal. So it's basically secreting a chemical that is similar to cannabis. So it's giving you very small doses, of course, but it gives you somewhat of a high similar to taking cannabis or marijuana or things like that. And if you look at it, it makes you creative. It calms you down, calms your anxiety, mellows you down. Of course, there's dopamine, serotonin, and a lot of other chemicals involved in that whole cocktail that gives you the runner's high and that feel-good feeling at the end. But that I found it really interesting that your body builds its own, like, in a way, like, there was an article that I was reading that said getting high on your own supply.
Yeah.
And that's basically that, when you're running, this is where it's coming from. It makes so much sense. Like, it makes so much sense because it's absolutely therapeutic. It's meditative. When I moved back, if you remember, I was 90 kilos when I moved back. And then once I started running and got into that health mode during the lockdown and all of that, I got into this whole weight loss path, and I ended up losing 20 kilos.
Wow.
At my lowest, I was 69 kilos, and I was around 90 at my peak. I'm somewhere in the middle now, balanced in the middle. But it was, for someone who lost 20 kilos, I would say that the mental health benefits of running outweigh the physical health benefits.
You
of
really
running.
think so?
Even 20 kilos can't justify because it's day and night. You know this. I went through a whole burnout phase, like a true out and out freaking burnout, like anxiety. Like if I had gone to a therapist at the time, I would have probably been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, you name it. It was classic burnout. That my phone would buzz and I would get anxious. That I don't know. I don't want to find out what was on the other side of it. I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. It was a really low. But at that time, I think running is what kept me going. I was able to pull out of it. I was able to take my time. Of course, work was very supportive. They kind of helped me, and I took a sabbatical for 3 months, changed my role after that. I took up meditation. I took up reading. So it was like, it was a mix of everything. I tried to look at it. I try to look at mental health. Everything in my life is an analogy with running now. So I looked at that phase like an injury for my brain. It was like an overuse injury. So in running, you get overuse injuries sometimes. So people get stress fractures, or you get, different kind of muscle tears and different kinds of things just by repeatedly doing the same motion. Sometimes you can get a stress fracture. So I saw the burnout as a stress fracture for my mental system essentially. So I treated it the same way I would treat a physical injury. So there was active recovery and there was passive recovery. The passive recovery was taking a break. So if I had an injury in my ankle, I would stop running, I would take a break, stop putting more pressure on it. So I took that sabbatical. I took 3 months off of work. Work was really supportive to allow me to do that. And then there was active recovery. The biggest part of my active recovery was running, because it gave me something to do. It motivated me to get out of bed. And I felt great after that. I was in a different mindset. I was able to control how I felt.
That's a good point.
It made me come back with a positive mindset. The meditation kind of calmed my anxiety, kind of like enhanced that whole this thing. It just allowed me to be with myself and separate myself from my thoughts. Because otherwise you just get so caught up in your thoughts sometimes, right? And the reading and then the creative aspect started, which is when I started my Instagram handle, The Runnerd. And I started The Runnerd with the idea of starting to nerd out about running a lot.
Yeah.
But it became a creative outlet for me. Instead of that, it's become my public journal. Interestingly, I just realized an hour before you came that today, it was to the day 3 years ago that I started that.
Oh man.
So this day 3 years ago I started that.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, thanks. So it was, but it's been such a great joy to journal my runs every day. Every day, like I come back and that 15-20 minutes of writing a long ass post, like allows me to relive it, and it's kind of become my journal, my gratitude journal, my creative outlet, my venting space, my ranting space, my place to relive it. It's just become
I
an outlet.
I feel Runnerd, your Instagram page is so interesting, because I always tell you, make fun of this, that you have these three pictures.
वही दो पोज में पूरा Instagram channel
you're putting 3 pictures. These 3 pictures you keep repeating in different t-shirts and been putting for 3 years, and you have like such ardent following, and people really want to comment on it, and they read your post and they read the same thing, and it completely goes against the rules of social media, because social media is about pleasure to the eyes,
short, visual,
high definition pictures, good dramatic pictures.
Me with my cheap ass phone, like
zoom in, zoom out, and all those music in the middle, and people making reels out of it, and it's been really lovely to see what you're doing with that channel, man.
I think the world of the runners' social media is very different from the rest of social media. It's like, luckily, running as a community is so collaborative. That's one of the other things that I love about it. That I think all runners inherently shed their egos, because the distance basically humbles you. Humbles you. The distance at some point humbles you.
Yeah.
Right? We've all kind of realized that, kind of moved past that very materialistic world. Well, not completely. We still love our running shoes and our running gear and all of that, the material comforts and everything. But I think what we value is something more core, something more pure. That joy and love for running kind of brings you together. And I really love meeting other runners and connecting with other runners.
Yeah, tell me, how's the Delhi running scene? Like, how's it like?
It's pretty awesome. I mean, it's insane how it's grown. So when I first started running, it was in 2011 before I moved to the US. And then I had an injury, and then life happened, and I had like a 7-year break in the US where I hardly ran. And I moved back and started running, which was weird because I had like such great places to run there, such clean air, good weather and everything, and I never ran there. And I choose to run in Delhi, battle Delhi's pollution and heat and everything to run here. But I think I really enjoy running here. I think we're really lucky in Delhi, especially around central Delhi and South Delhi, Lutyens Delhi area, beautiful roads, beautiful places to run in. The community is really collaborative. There are a bunch of great groups. There are a bunch of great runners, really seasoned runners, and it's growing like insane. Like, it is baffling for me to see from 2011 to now, the number of people running. You go to Nehru Park on a Saturday morning or on a Sunday morning, you can't find parking on the road. Not even the parking, but all along the park. Just because there are so many runners who have just parked there, and it is so awesome to go there and just kind of meet so many people. And the more you do it, you start to get to know people, people start to get to know you, and then, you can nerd out more about running, share your passion with them. And the beautiful thing is, so I'm personally not really affiliated to any of the groups per se, because I do most of my runs solo because I'm an evening runner. Most people do their runs in the morning. But because I have made so many friends, because runners are just so friendly and collaborative, that over all these races or connecting online or traveling to run marathons or whatever, meeting people there, partying with them after and things like that. So I've got so many friends that in the summers when I'm training for a marathon, when there's a long run that I need to do, when I'm looking for company, I'll hit up a few people and they'll be like, yeah, sure, we're running here, join us, like blah, blah. And so there's no they're very receptive. There's no oh, you're not a part of our cult, you have to sign, do the, Pledge of Allegiance and whatever. But they're all very friendly, very collaborative, always very welcoming. So, I'm able to find different friends to run with. We go explore different places in Delhi and start at ungodly hours. But that company is also great. So in those long runs, doing it solo is really hard. And especially when you want to, in these summers, you have to start super early.
Yeah.
Even at 4:35 in the morning, you're 30 plus degrees, 34, 35 degrees in the morning. It's brutal. Doing that alone is just really, really hard.
Yeah.
So that company is really awesome and that community is really great.
Plus you can have beers with them later, so of course.
Of course, yeah. Beers happen more, I think, after races. But
celebrating accomplishments.
But yeah, celebrating accomplishments. That's when, parties get pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But I think here we end up getting breakfast after the long runs. So it's more different kinds of brews, coffees and breakfast post long runs, and we do party hard after
Tell
races.
me, Dhruv, that do you have some interesting people, individuals who you've met, who you have discussed with, and you found them very surprising and very different from very offbeat people in the running community?
Lots, man. Everyone has very different journeys and stories. There's so many. I mean, I don't even know where to start on that, but it's very interesting that every runner that you meet has a very different approach to running, has a very different appeal to why they are running, right? And they I'll give you an example. So there are the very kind of scientific and professional athlete perspective sort of approach to runners. So essentially runners who have a very scientific and a professional athlete sort of mindset, to where they're very structured training plans and very set pace targets for okay, this minute I want to be running at this pace, this many minutes per kilometer or whatever it is, and this is how I want to structure my whole race. This is the target time, and this is how much energy I want to be taking in. This is how many electrolytes. Very scientific about how they go about it. And then you've got more of the romantics of like, it's like, I
Poets.
just want to be, the quants versus the poets, like essentially. So it's like, then you've got the poets and the romantics who are just out there to like enjoy and like
Appreciate the nature,
look at the flora that's changing with the weather, go out, explore the trails, the barefoot runners, and then you've got on the other side the guys wearing the carbon plated shoes and like getting the latest in technology, doing all kinds of like experimentation with their nutrition and things like that. So it's a whole spectrum.
Yeah.
It's a whole spectrum. But there are a lot of people like there's my friend Rohit Pathak that I run a lot with. The guy frigging fought cancer and then came back and has been running like crazy. Like he's beating his times from before, from pre diagnosis and
Wow.
treatment. Like it's just nuts what people are able to do. There's another guy, Aniket, that I was just running with on Saturday. I haven't gotten to know him much, but in the last 3 kilometers, I was dying and I was like, maybe I should be done, like, whatever. And this guy was like, I'm still going to go, I'm going to go do a little bit more. How much more of your target you've got left? When I stopped to take some water. And I had 3 more in my goal, but I was contemplating like kind of like on that cusp of like, should I not? Like it was too hot. Like I was struggling. And then I was like, you know what, if you're running, I'll come do another round with you and get to my goal. So I started running with him and, I just asked him what he does. And he told me that, he grew up in a small village in West Bengal. He now works for FIFA. He's a senior advisor to the president of FIFA. And I was like, how did you, like, how did this come about? I didn't even know that FIFA had an office here or any employees in India and things like that. So he was telling me that he won the ESPN sports quiz back in the day. I don't know if you remember. It was a big thing when we were in school on Star Sports and ESPN. Harsha Bhogle used to host it. He's like, he won it, I think, like twice or something like that. And like, that kind of became this newsworthy sort of like article that this kid who didn't even have a TV at home was winning the ESPN sports quiz. So it was like this story, but that kind of like set his path. And then, he kind of went into like sports management, sports journalism, and then luck, chance, whatever you want to call it. Met someone at a bar someday, like who, one of the directors at Star Sports or whatever, gave him this, introduced him to the FIFA guys who were wanting to hire for a project. And like, this life just happens. And that's the other beautiful part about running and the running community is that you get to know these people.
Yeah.
And on these long runs, you get to have these conversations which are just open, such from the heart, and like you get to know people, and everyone has such interesting stories.
And because you're running, you're in that state of mind also. You're down to earth and you're not trying to prove something.
Yeah.
You're just telling your like completely bare story without any biases or anything in it.
It's at such a human level. It's at a very primal level.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a very, I feel like, post-run, post-race, even during the run, you're probably the most truest version of yourself. And when you think back later, you also feel a little vulnerable at times. Because you're just so emotional at the time. You'll see so many people like tearing up at the end of a marathon. Those aren't tears of pain like sometimes they are, but most times they're tears of joy, because it's just that emotion that you're overwhelmed with it. It's like you shed everything and it's just you at the core. And I think that's such a beautiful place to be when you reach that place. And I think that's kind of what humbles you as a runner. Like, it's like I've never been disappointed with a race result, because I never have a time target. I always have a broad target. I'll have a goal in mind, because it's like I'm playing the game, but I don't attach any significance to it. Like, if I don't hit it, I'll be disappointed.
But you've ended up doing 5 of the 6 international marathons.
The world majors, yeah.
The world majors.
Yeah, so there are 6 world majors. I've been able to do 5 of them so far.
That's awesome.
Let's see how.
Which all countries have you done now? Which all cities have you done?
So there's Berlin, Chicago, Tokyo, New York, and London. and that's the space for Boston.
Boston.
Yeah.
When is that happening?
So Boston happens every year in April on Patriots Day. So it's on, I think, the third.
Are you
Monday.
on for that?
I'm not signed up. Boston is the hardest one to get through.
Okay.
I am really far away from the time qualifier, so I'll have to find another way to do it. They don't even have a lottery like a lot of the other places have, but I might be able to do it with a charity, which is how I did London as well. So they tie up with some charities, and you kind of apply to the charities to raise funds for them to get a entry into it, which I feel is a great way to do it.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, for
Because
sure.
if you find a cause that you care about, then it's a good way to kind of bring some attention towards it and do your bit towards.
Of course.
getting
I
some money
remember
for
you
it.
raised 100% what you're supposed to
Yeah,
raise last time.
yeah, that was
right?
great, and thank you.
That was
to,
awesome, man.
Thank you to you guys and everyone that
Yeah,
helped.
we
with,
were just trying our best,
Yeah,
man.
no, it was. I felt really, and that adds to it. That adds to it.
Yeah.
When you accomplish that, you realize how long ago the journey started, and it's like an exercise in delayed gratification. In this world of like instant gratification, where everyone wanting everything right there, at the click of a button, like next day deliveries and like instant buttons and like everything's instant. The world of running like takes you back to like working towards a longer term goal. Like a marathon, like the majors for me was a decade goal. Like I was like, this decade, I want to finish these 6 races. I've done them a lot quicker than I anticipated. But, for me, like.
You did it in 2 years.
Well, it'll be, if I'm able to do Boston, so I've done, let's just put it the other way, like I've done 5 of them in 18 months or so. So, which is a little insane, even when I look back at it, and but that's the other beauty of it, that it reminds me of the fact that I'm capable of so much more than I give myself credit for.
Yeah.
And that's my reason for the tattoos. Like a lot of people are like, why get these tattoos kind of thing. It's a reminder to myself.
Yeah, whenever
These
you're
are-
feeling low, you're bogged
these
down,
are-
you just look
yeah,
at them and
whenever
you're like,
self-doubt creeps in,
I've done my shit. I know how to do this.
It's like, whenever self-doubt creeps in, this is my affirmation.
Yeah.
That I remind myself that I'm capable of a lot more than I ever give myself credit for. It reminds me that I can do tough things, and that if you're consistent and persistent with something, you can achieve crazy things. So
Yeah. Tell me, like this running community in Delhi, how are they dealing with pollution, and how is it happening? Like, are they doing some detox after that, or they're not, or they're just figuring out right now, or they plan to run some in some other city, or what are they thinking about this?
yeah, it's a really tough one. To be a runner in Delhi is a tough one, because there's no way to detox from pollution. And unlike allergens, your body doesn't build an immunity to it either. It's just something that is doing permanent damage. Everybody has a different take on it. Some people take the ostrich approach and just put their head in the sand and say it is what it is. I can't control what I can't control, and I'm just gonna go do it. Like, if it does harm to me, then so be it. Their thought is that people smoke, and they make that choice. They kind of ignore the fact that it's bad for them. How bad can this be? That's kind of
Yeah.
and nobody really knows how bad it's going to be, right? There's studies and research done on it, but and then there are people who set their own boundaries. Some people run with masks as well. A lot of people have different approaches. I'll kind of share my approach, because I'm asthmatic, so I'm a lot more sensitive to air quality than others might be. So if you look at my phone's home screen, there's the weather app widget, which shows me the temperature for the summertime. Like, I wait for it to be at least below 40 to go out to run. And in the winter, there's an AQI app, which stays there year long. And the AQI number tells me how bad the pollution is. So in the winter, I'm tracking the AQI to make sure that it's below 300. which is also 300 is hazardous.
Yeah.
By global standards, in a lot of the Western cities, they would declare a state of emergency if it hit 300. But in Delhi, we cross 1000 on a scale of 0 to 500.
After 999, the meter stops working.
Yeah, because and the scale is actually supposed to be 0 to 500. But in Delhi, on a scale of 0 to 500, the pollution goes to 1200. So it's at that point, it's like people reach the level of resignation के भाई अब क्या ही कर लेंगे, अब ये है तो है, अब इसमें क्या कर लोगे?
So this Ivona's one relative got cancer, lung cancer. And why I'm smiling is because they went to the doctor and they said, okay, how did he get lung cancer? He doesn't smoke, he doesn't do anything. Doctor rang is because the pollution in the air. And the pollution there has not gone above 150. So I was actually, feeling, I don't know, I was laughing or crying, I didn't know because I was like,
it's like
150 where someone is having cancer.
You're laughing
doctor
at like
is
what
saying,
is going to happen to us?
I was like, the doctor is saying on 150 you got cancer.
Yeah, because
and we
that's
haven't
the cause.
seen 150. We see 150.
150
probably,
is a great day for us.
Like we see it in probably a dozen, only 12 to 14 days in a year. We see 150.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. And as runners, we really feel the brunt of it. We really feel the brunt of it. It's really hard to cope with, but so I try to find. So I am lucky to have the flexibility on my work schedule because I work for a US based company. My work is more later in the evening heavy, and the rest of the day I have more flexibility. So I will in the winters take a break during lunchtime to go for my run. So I'll duck out of work, go do a run in the afternoon because that's when the air quality is the lowest. The temperature is pretty manageable in the Delhi winters. It's nice to be out in the sun. But that's the only time. But even then, there are days where 3, 4, 5 days in a stretch, it doesn't come down below 350. So it's like I can't run. And that's the most frustrating
Isn't
part.
there any technology mask made which really filters it down?
There is, but there isn't because it's like it's so restrictive on your breathing that you can't do intense training. There is the science on it is kind of like split because some people feel like there are training masks that help you strengthen your lungs. So there are people who wear training masks even without pollution to restrict the airflow, to strengthen their lungs, to be able to train their bodies to do more with less air, essentially trying to improve their VO2 max, which is their body's efficiency to use whatever oxygen is available more efficiently. So there are schools of thought on specific training masks, but I find it really uncomfortable to run with a mask. My doctor doesn't like the idea, my pulmonologist, so I kind of go with his advice. So I don't try not to run with a mask. There are times when I have run with a mask. I've also run with basic neck gaiters, COVID times when it was like complete like pandemic, like nobody knew how it's transmitting, where it was like you had to wear a mask by law or whatever. Initial days and everything when the lockdown had just lifted. So I wore a neck gaiter and all of that, but given a choice, I try not to run when the air quality is bad, and I don't like to run with a mask, but
tell me, like, if some person is getting into running and he wants to build a passion, or let's say he just want to do it for fitness, because obviously passion doesn't get built in few days. It takes time to just understand yourself that okay, this is what you love. But how should a person start, and what should be the key milestones he should look at for the next, let's say, 30 days?
So I'm not a coach per se, so I don't know what the best way to do it is, but I'll tell you what my way of doing it was, or what I've seen in these years of running, how I've seen other people get into it and things like that. Of course, there's the easiest way is to get a coach, or someone that that runs, kind of start with them. But I think there are a few basics that most people don't realize, which sometimes frustrate me that they didn't teach this to us at a school level. Running was always the punishment. Before you got to play the sport. Like even when we went for basketball practice, it was like first go run 15 laps of the track and then come and play. And then it was like the last 5 had to run 5 more laps. So nobody ever taught you how to run. It was just like, okay, everybody knows inherently how to run, but like nobody teaches you how to run efficiently. What pace to run at. The ideology is always to run fast, right? Everyone's trying to, every time running is to get there fast. Like that's their everyone's thought. Walk or you run, then you're trying to run really hard. So I learned this idea of a conversational pace. So the idea is that when you're running, when you're starting, you should be able to hold a conversation. Initially that feels really slow. But the fact is that your respiratory rate and your heart rate are directly proportional. So they're always in sync. So when your respiratory rate is low, you're able to hold a conversation. You're not getting out of breath, which means your heart rate is also low. So it's a good indicator that you're somewhere in zone 2, which is why you want to do most of your training. So when you start out, it is really boring because you're like really slow in that conversational pace. So the first idea is to start in zone 2 in that conversational pace. Then the second part is stick to it. You're going to have to endure through the initial pain, boredom, whatever you want to call it. It just feels, even today when I start running, the first 2 to 3 kilometers are a bit of a drag. They're always like, hey, yeah, why am I doing this? I could just be sitting somewhere or lying in bed or like watching something on TV. There are 20 million things that I could be doing. Or like, sometimes it's just really bad weather and you're like, it's like at that point you're very like in your body. But after a while, you kind of transcend that thought pattern. And the physical act of running becomes sort of semi-subconscious, much like breathing. So like you're not conscious of your breathing until you think about your breathing. So when you think about it, you can control it. You can stop it, you can increase your pace, you can slow down. You have control over it when you think about it. But when you're not thinking about it, it's happening on its own. So that's how the physical act of running becomes after a while. So first is to stay patient to hit that point inside a run. Then it's about staying patient to be consistent day on day so that you can get better, because that's where the gains are. So there's this beautiful quote that said, your workout doesn't have to be extreme, just consistent. Because those gains are built little over little, like you build on the previous day. So like I was saying, the 1 week the long run was 30K, the next week the long run was 32K. So it's like a less than a 10% increase in my long run distance over a week, which is why a marathon training plan is 16 weeks. Because over 16 weeks, you're starting with really short, simple, slow, easy runs and low total weekly mileage and low, like short runs, even your long run is short. And then week on week, you're building 10, 20%, like, sort of like increasing the intensity, the distance, the total mileage and things like that. So it teaches you to be consistent.
Right.
And to build on it. So I think for beginners, I would say start with a easy pace, a pace where you can hold a conversation. Just this one piece of advice that I felt like if somebody had taught this to us back in school days, like it would have changed my life a lot sooner.
Yeah.
A lot sooner.
Yeah.
It changed my life ultimately, but it would have happened a lot sooner. And so I would say run at a conversational pace, stick with it. During the run, it does get easier. And then just force yourself to get out the door.
Be consistent.
Be consistent, because it's like, I till date, like sometimes I have to like fool myself into getting out. Like I'm really like feeling lazy or down and out, and I'm like, should I skip it today? Or like I don't have the time. And I'll try to fool myself in terms of saying that, okay, I'll just go for a walk. Because I know that the biggest challenge is putting on my shoes. Once I've put on my shoes, even when I'm telling myself I'll go for a walk, I know for sure that I'm not only going to run, I'm going to run the distance that I thought I'm going to run. Because once you start, then you don't want to like shortchange yourself. You don't want to negotiate with yourself.
Yeah, because once you negotiate, you lose your self-esteem, and then there's no looking back. Once you've lost it, then you will always cut short everything.
It's your own word, right? I mean, you're doing it. Why are you doing it? Why am I running a marathon? Like, who else cares? Sure, people around me care, but like, I mean, if I don't get to my goal, if I don't get to the goal time, if I don't even finish, if I don't do anything, it's not going to make any difference to anyone. It's my own goal, right? And at some point, it becomes an exercise in keeping your own word, keeping your own word to yourself. So you value your own word, and there's a different power to that as well. Some people call it discipline, some people call it integrity. You can call it whatever you want, but I think it just becomes a habit of doing something just because I said I would do it.
You know, there's a great strategy called habit stacking, where to be consistent, people stack things which they do regularly. Like you get up, you brush your teeth, and after that you always do something. Probably you comb your hair.
It's a routine.
After that, it's a routine.
Yeah.
So you have to keep adding to, stacking to that routine that, okay, after brushing my hair, first thing I'm going to do is wear my athletic shorts, wear my shoes. So keep stacking it up so you don't miss out on those steps, and then it becomes a part of your thing.
Yeah.
And then you tokenize it that, okay, if I complete it today, I'll give myself half an hour of Netflix.
Right.
Or and some people go on a different route, which
Like
is not
gamification
suggested.
or like, yeah.
Gamification, which is not suggested, which is like punish yourself. That, okay, if I don't do it, I'll put 100 rupees of
Yeah.
mine for donation. I mean, it's not punishing, it's helping someone else, but
Yeah.
it's getting out of your pocket, so you feel that, okay, I have to do it.
It's the carrot versus the stick.
Yeah, exactly.
it's
So
yeah.
people, it's a good way to start. Of course, end of the day, it has to be your mindset.
Yeah.
But it can bring you to a certain level where things start flowing in the morning as a routine.
Yeah.
Like it becomes automated on its own. Your mind is you're just walking towards your shoes rather than thinking, should I do it or not do it, how it should be.
Yeah.
So I have done it and I've seen it that it's very successful. Like if you just stack up your habits,
Yeah.
it becomes very easy to keep doing things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's essentially latching on to something that's already happening, just kind of like automating it in a way.
Yeah.
Because like so much of our lives just happen automatically, right?
Exactly.
It's like you don't think about certain things. Like, you know, it's like if I give you like colors, like, you know, I tell you like, do you want a red or a black? You know, it's like you'll instinctively choose one because at some point you've made a decision. At some
Yeah.
point, that's automated for you. Like you're not evaluating it, sitting there and doing a whole like analysis of like, you know, this versus that. Like you've already made that decision and it's automated. And so many of our things just happen automated in a day as well. And our routine is like that. So I think consistency helps you make that habit.
Yeah.
And tying it to other consistent things, I think is how you kind of build that habit of being consistent as well. Like, you know,
No,
tying it to what
absolutely,
you're
man.
already doing or what's working in your life.
So tell me, what is your plan for the next 10 years?
For the next 10 years.
what is your micro and macro plans?
So
you
bro,
have in
10
mind?
years का तो plan था ये 6 majors भागने का जो hopefully 2.5 years में पूरा हो जाएगा. So
अब कुछ और नया ढूंढना पड़ेगा.
well, we'll find something else, I'm sure.
14 peaks.
No, I don't think mountains are my thing. I think that's a different ball game altogether. And I've realized like a lot of people had said, why don't you get into like triathlons and everything? Because
Yeah.
I used to be a swimmer, so you know, I've never done cycling very seriously, but you know, I've enjoyed cycling as a kid. And like I said,
Yeah.
I used to bike to work in Austin and stuff like that. But I've realized like for me, I run because I enjoy running. And that's become really important to me. It's like it's shown me a world where you can actually enjoy the process. Like I don't run to get to that finish line to get to that medal. I run because I enjoy the process. It's like you can't run marathons because you want that medal. You can run one marathon to run that medal to be called a
Absolutely,
marathoner. But you won't
absolutely.
run a second one if you haven't enjoyed
Yeah,
the whole
absolutely.
training block. You have to enjoy the training. They say that the marathon happens in those days and weeks and months of training. The race itself is just a victory lap,
Yeah.
right? So I actually train with that mindset, with like this is the marathon that I'm training for. So I savor the training, I enjoy the training.
Love the struggle.
Love the struggle, and you know the struggle's a part of it, whether I love it or not, but I've learned to love the act of running. So I'm sure I'll find a goal. Like the goals are like different games that I take on to play. I think these 6 were a goal that I set out because, and not because I don't see the majors as a badge of honor per se. And that's probably because I'm not like a time qualifier going into these majors. I'm getting into them through lotteries or through charities and stuff like that. Uh, Qualifying for Boston is a badge of honor. If someone hits that time target and qualifies and makes it into Boston, that's a badge of honor. But going in to run these races is an experience, it's not a badge of honor, right? So I'm collecting these experiences because I love to travel, and I've realized that running in new places is just a different high. It's a great way to explore a city, and the energy in these major races is just unparalleled. It's insane. It's like a party on the streets.
Yeah,
It's
I ran
just-
few marathons in different cities.
Yeah, we ran Jaipur together.
Yeah, and you know what I felt, that the way you see the city on your feet,
Is
you can't see with anything. Even when you run marathon in Gurgaon or wherever, you have walked,
See a
you
new
have
light.
driven past that roads multiple
Yeah.
thousands of times,
Yeah.
but you have missed probably 90% of the things there. But
Right.
when you're running, you think and see that, dude, this was there. I never appreciated this. I never saw this. I never
Yeah.
knew this exists.
Yeah, it's
So
like
I think it's a great way to see the place.
it's like, when you drive when you if you ever ride a bike, which I know you did and I did too, right? You realize that biking you experience so much more than driving a
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
And then the same thing when you slow it down a little bit more on a cycle, you're like, holy shit, there's like more detail to this place. Same thing when you slow it down to running. It's like you get even closer. You're like more one with your surroundings and your environment. And you get to experience it in a different way. You could argue that walking would do it even further, but then walking's too slow, right? And so running is more efficient because you're quicker with it. So, and that's just my bias for the love of running, like speaking. But I've learned to, like, everywhere I travel, I have to go for a run. My running shoes, my foam roller, and everything, my running gear, like, always travels with
This
me.
is
My wife
another-
is like, oh, wife is like, what the hell is this? We went on a honeymoon to
The 7 kgs are for my running shit, and
Yeah,
the other
exactly.
big bag is for everything else.
We went for a honeymoon to Maldives because we got married during COVID,
Yeah.
as you remember. And that was one of the only places that was open. So we were in a tiny little island in the middle of nowhere. In the morning, I would wake up and do like laps of like 250 meters was the length of the circumference of the inner loop of that island where all the basically all the rooms and the cottages were. And I was just running laps around that island in the morning. She's like, what the hell have I gotten married to? Like, who the hell wakes up?
She's
on a
waking up
break?
and
She's
he's like,
waking- I'm finishing breakfast. I'm calling her, are you going to come for breakfast? She's like, no, I'm sleeping in, man. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? I'm having my breakfast and, like, we're meeting after breakfast. She's like, the hell is wrong with you,
that's
man?
funny.
Like,
How big was that island?
so like I said, like the loop that I was taking was 250 meters. So 4 laps to get to 1 kilometer. I was running 5K. One day a family there from India like stopped me and said, dude, what the hell, man, you're making us feel bad. We are sitting here having our breakfast, like loading up on all this food. And then we just see you like just doing this. You're making us like look bad and feel bad.
Coming to honeymoon, are you planning to have kids, or are you waiting for another COVID to make that happen?
No, man. I think we're quite enjoying the dink life.
You're not planning to have kids, is it?
No kids. I
But
think
you
there
love
are-
kids.
I do, I do like kids. I have nephews and nieces, and I think
Yeah, I know you're pretty
I
close
enjoy
to them.
their
Like
company,
on,
and I'm pretty close to them. But it's a responsibility that I'm not willing to take on, not yet. And so I've come around on this whole discussion. Interestingly, when I proposed to my wife, to Swas, it came up in conversation, because we were having this conversation about the future, but I felt like we'd been dating for like a decade,
Yeah.
so it was like a given, but it hadn't been said. So I felt like we were skirting around the issue. So while we were out for dinner, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go out and say this, like I'm just going to go out and ask you. So it wasn't a planned proposal kind of thing. So I asked her if she'll marry me, and she takes a 30-second pause, and I was like, wait, what? Like, I thought this was a given. Like, I'm just trying to like put it into
After,
words.
like-
Yeah, after like a decade or like dating
Decade,
or whatever.
yeah.
So first she's like, I want to go get my MD. So she's a doctor, right? So she's like, I want to go get my MD. I said, yeah, like, I mean, I'm not telling you to get married tomorrow. Go study as much as you want, you nerd. Like, so she's like, okay, another 30-second pause. And I was like, what the hell's going on? So then she's like, but I don't want kids. At that time, I was like, ooh, that might be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
So another 30-second pause. But then she was like, fine, I'll bear babies to be with you. Begrudgingly. But I think over the years, I came around. Not because she kind of pushed me towards that side or said anything. Like it was, I independently kind of reached that conclusion. One was because I realized that I think I was around 35, 30 to 35, like 32, 35, somewhere there. When I realized that, I'm not ready to take on this responsibility anytime soon. And then there's like, people say like if you want to have kids, you want to have them sooner in your life. Biological clock, blah, blah, blah. All of that. There are ways around everything, but like the core of it was that I reached the conclusion that part of the reason that I wanted to have kids was a little egotistical. Because it was like I wanted to see a reflection of myself in another being. And I kind of reached the point of like what Aryan race or like what gifted genetics have I been born with that I must reproduce and create more of this. Like, it's like, and there are enough kids in the world that need a home. So if I ever have the urge to nurture a kid, then we can always adopt.
Yeah.
So I discussed that with Swas and she was...
No, that's my plan also.
She was more than happy, of
one,
course. So
one kid I want to adopt for sure.
Yeah.
Rest I don't know, but definitely one kid.
Yeah,
because if giving
that'll be the day to see Arpit Sharma as, as a dad.
Yeah,
I think it'll be one of the coolest
dads. It'll be nice,
around.
man. It'll be, giving someone home and giving someone that opportunity, bringing him to a level where he's exposed to different opportunity. Otherwise, it's in India especially, the gap is so big that people do not have the basic opportunities. Only forget about being lucky.
Yeah.
Forget about
Is
that.
Is that probability like, you can, that you don't realize that privilege, like a lot of people don't recognize their own privilege, that they don't recognize what they already had. So their starting point was so much higher. They had a platform to jump off of, to go further higher.
That's what they say, that it's kind of a curse if you, in entrepreneurship, it's kind of a curse if you're born in a rich family. Because what happens is that you're already so high that you don't want to come down and start fresh.
Right.
You're like, अबे ये कौन start करेगा यार, ये बस इतने पैसे मिलेंगे, अरे यार ये सब समझ में नहीं आ रहा. But that business can go probably 10-fold than what you are today.
Right.
But you don't want to go back to that level. So it's kind of a curse, because once you're already at 5-6, you don't want to come back to zero and start. But if you're -1 or 0, you have no plan, because everything above that is 1. So you're like, let's do it.
So you've got, it can be a blessing in disguise as well. But also, like, I mean, there's nothing to take away from someone who's starting from that point, right? I mean,
no, of course.
I think the thing with privilege that a lot of people get caught up in is that people with privilege don't want to recognize it because they feel like it takes away from what they've done.
Yeah, it discounts their effort.
And that's not true, because a lot of people had that opportunity, but
how many are doing something
made
about
something
it?
out of it? So it's like there's nothing to take away from it, but there's also something to recognize that that I think it's to manage your own ego and to keep hubris out of it. That don't get like arrogant about it. That I have created this. That I think there has to be a level of recognition of the fact that just because you are there, it's not all you. There you have to recognize and be grateful for everything that allowed you to be you as well.
Right.
Allowed you to build on what you had. And I think there is a lot to be recognized in building from what you have. Because at the end of the day, you got to play the cards that you're dealt. Right? So there's no point getting excited about...
Everything has its own pros and cons and advantages, disadvantages. Like, if you're born in a business family, it has its own disadvantages, because you can't call the shots. Someone elder in the family is calling all the shots, and you're just following up. And you want to do something else, but because you can't, because the structure is made in a way that the end decision is taken by the signatures are done by the head of the family.
That's how the hierarchy is.
And then that's why some of the people, some of my friends got frustrated. They're like, कि भैया हमें अलग कर दो, give us a certain amount,
Yeah.
छोटा कर लूँगा
But
पर
that's
अपना
the point,
करूँगा,
right?
you know?
That's the challenge as well. There are so many people that I've seen that you also know, who have grown up just depending on that family business. So at times that's where it becomes the curse as well. It's like they have banked on it. So they never invested in
Their own skills.
their own education, their own skills, their own like development, personal development, career development, growth or things like that. And that's the negative comes in two ways. When the negative comes, there are times where it's really prosperous as well. We have a lot of friends who are doing really well, whose family businesses have flourished and they've been able to grow it as well. But there are times when there are negatives because they don't have even to go apart, even to separate out, they are dependent because they haven't built any other skill. They don't have that employability or anything, so they are dependent. So when there is differences, there are people who wanted to marry their girlfriends or boyfriends or partners, but their family didn't agree and they didn't have the ability to go against their family because that was their whole world.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying that they should go against their family, but I'm saying that even if they wanted to, it became,
They don't even have
it was
a choice.
It was golden handcuffs, right?
Yeah,
It was golden handcuffs that they didn't have. They would have to give up their whole life, not just their family. They would have to give up their whole life, their
Complete
lifestyle, their
identity
way.
because that's all they had.
That's all they had. And then on the flip side, there were people who banked on that and everything was great on every aspect, but the family business failed. I've seen some friends whose businesses were worth 1,000 crores going kaput. Now that guy doesn't know how to do anything else. The struggle for him then is also really hard. So sometimes taking that privilege for granted or being too tunnel visioned in what you have can also be a challenge. But those are the rare cases. Overall, like I think if you have that privilege and kind of have that platform, I think it's something. It's something that gives you the opportunity to do a lot more.
Yeah,
So
and you should do a lot more because you know ये दिल्ली में खासकर एक बड़ी saying है कि यार उस पे इतना पैसा है उसे और क्या करने की जरूरत है लाइफ में. मैंने कहा यार ये कैसी बात हुई. मैंने कहा तो घर पे बैठ के क्या नेटफ्लिक्स और पॉपकॉर्न खाए रोज बैठ के क्या करे मतलब ठीक है. He is making money, but there has to be a purpose of life to getting up in the morning. और ठीक है पैसों forget money.
Don't do it for money. Don't do it for money.
Don't do it for money. Do it for, let's say, recognition. Do it for helping someone else. Do it for changing the world for the good. Do it for people who are underprivileged.
For your own happiness, man. I mean,
do it for your own happiness. Do small.
Pick a passion
do
and
small.
whatever.
Like for example, some look at Ujas. He has a business of garments and everything, and in COVID he started painting. And
he's made that art his whole thing.
He's made his art his own thing, and now it's not like it is anywhere close to it'll make him money anywhere close to what he's making in his business.
But I mean, he's doing it for the love of it.
But it's his purpose.
Right?
It's his purpose that he gets up on a weekend and he's like, okay, I'll complete this art and I want to make this. People are calling him that make this for us, that for us. So that's
awesome,
given him a
right?
purpose, and he's like, Arpit, all this while, now I know that I was not known for anything. And this has become my identity, and I feel so good that my identity has become of an artist. Before that, I was what? Before that, what is business? Entrepreneurship is not an identity. वो तो सभी करने हैं, सबको पैसे कमाने हैं, सभी entrepreneur हैं.
It's a mode of self-expression. It's an extension of who he is. So he's bringing out who he is in that art, and that's what people are recognizing and liking, right? And I think it's so important to find something that you love to do, like where you love the process, where the end result is the bonus. Like for me, running, or even when I used to brew beer, I used to enjoy the process. Of course, I loved the end result of the beer.
By the way, when are we having that brewed beer? Why you stop making it?
It's challenging to do in India. So there's, I mean, apart from the whole legal grey area of like whether home brewing is even legal or illegal here.
But can I say that you home brew beer sometimes?
I haven't really home brewed in India since I moved back. Yeah, I think there's a gray area, and then there's also, I don't know. I haven't gotten back into the routine. So in that habit stacking and the
Yeah,
routine,
yeah,
like in
yeah,
the US,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
a routine.
Yeah.
Like over the weekend, like every other weekend, that was like, okay, I'm gonna brew a batch now. That hasn't happened here yet. So I don't know, but like yeah. So like I was saying, like I enjoyed the process of brewing, and of course I liked the end result of the beer itself. Same thing with my coffee now. Like I've started nerding out. That's my new like toy to play with. Is like every day I spend those 10 minutes making my espresso shots and like
Right.
appreciating different beans, playing, tinkering with it, learning new skills on like how little things change the texture, flavor, and
Yeah,
everything, taste
yeah.
of it. So it's like enjoying the process while enjoying the end result.
Have
as
you
well.
started refilling the pots?
No, so I don't do the pods anymore.
Oh, you don't do the pots anymore?
No, so
Okay.
I'm making like espresso, like taking beans, grinding.
Oh, then
them, and,
I'll
like, doing
send
proper
you
espresso.
some very special beans I
Yeah?
have. It's amazing.
Sure.
It's from Australia.
Love
I'll
it.
send you. You have to grind
Oh,
them.
I'm
and
actually
make it.
having some beans from Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll
that
send you
my
some. I've
cousin
been
brought for
grinding
me.
them
My
and
aunt and
making
my cousin
coffee
brought for me.
in that old style coffee filter, that
Okay, the
kettle,
pour over, yeah.
which you put on the gas and you heat it. And
Okay, the mocha pot.
yeah, and that
yeah.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So it's got good flavor. So I'll send it to you.
sure.
Fine. Great conversation, bro.
Yeah, likewise, man.
We'll do it again.
Always great. Always
Lovely.
great talking.